Welcome to Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release, a podcast dedicated to licensed wildlife rehabilitators and the veterinarians who support them. I'm your host, Gail Buell. Techniques we discuss here are meant for licensed wildlife professionals. If you aren't licensed and trained for wildlife rehabilitation, do not attempt to capture, hold, or rehabilitate any wild animal. If you find an injured wild animal, a wildlife professional can recommend next steps. We will tackle topics about rescue, care, management, reconditioning, and releasing wildlife found in North America. This is a deep dive into each subject. We hope to give rehabilitators information they can use because they're already going to great lengths to rescue and nurse animals back to health. There are three possible outcomes in wildlife rehabilitation: release, euthanasia, and placement. An injured or orphaned wild animal's journey to restored health and independence in their natural habitat is delicate and complex. We draw techniques and expertise from many disciplines. Many animals brought into rehabilitation cannot be saved. The last gift we can give them is humane euthanasia. We'll talk more about when this is necessary. Sometimes animals are deemed non-releasable and evaluated to be suitable for a life in captivity. When that happens, we shift to a long-term approach to managing their care, training, and housing. Some such animals serve as ambassador animals, a term for animals that rehabilitators use to educate the public. Each episode, we'll speak with experts who represent specialty topics across the profession of wildlife rehabilitation, ambassador animal care and management, showcasing best practices. Hey everyone, I am so excited, as usual, to have on today's episode Amanda Nicholson. And Amanda Nicholson is the Senior Vice President at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. And she is an absolutely amazing person, and I'm so lucky to be able to call her a very good friend of mine. But we are going to talk about social media today. So Amanda, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm very excited too.
Yay, we're both excited. It's might come through on our voices. And you may not think social media is exciting, but it is.
It is.
And there's some really good things about it that we thought that we could talk about today. So, but before we really get started, Amanda, can you tell everybody what your origin story is?
Sure. How far back do you want me to go?
Oh, as far back as you can remember.
No.
How far back can you remember? I can only remember last week. So
we don't have that much time.
As far back as you would like to go. How did you get involved in wildlife rehabilitation and in this world?
So my entry point into wildlife rehabilitation was here at the Wildlife Center of Virginia. I have essentially grown up here, or maybe not grown up here. I don't know. Depends on how you define that, I guess. But I started volunteering at the Wildlife Center when I was in college, and then I did an externship here and had so much fun. I decided this is what I wanted to do with my life. And I was very lucky enough to snag a job as I was graduating. So 3 days before I graduated, I found out I got the job here.
Wow.
And saved by a matter of days. And I was hired on as a 3-day-a-week wildlife rehabilitator and a weekend front desk coordinator. So I kind of had a split position. And that was... I'll date myself here, but that was way back in 2001. So obviously I started working when I was 10 years old.
Exactly. We won't talk about labor laws or anything.
No. So yeah, I've been here for 22 years and have held a lot of different positions over the years. I spent a lot of time in wildlife rehabilitation. It kind of went, a lot of wildlife rehabilitation and a little bit of outreach work, and then a little more outreach work and a little less wildlife rehabilitation, and then a lot of outreach work and a tiny little bit of rehabilitation. And then, probably in 2010, I became the director of outreach. So was responsible for the center's department that did all of our outreach and education, which included social media. And have been more in that side of things up until now, really. I mean, I oversee a lot of different activities of the center, but still have a heavy hand in all of the center's outreach and communications.
Excellent. Excellent. And for those who are not familiar with the Wildlife Center of Virginia, which if they aren't, they should be, and we will definitely have links in the show notes. But do you want to give just a very brief kind of 30,000 feet overview of the Wildlife Center of Virginia?
Yeah, we are a hospital for native wildlife, and our mission is to teach the world to care about and to care for wildlife and the environment. So we are a teaching hospital. We have a full veterinary team here. We get a lot of students in from all around the world who are learning about wildlife medicine and rehabilitation. Hands-on, and then it's always been from the very beginning a big goal of ours to teach people about living with wildlife, how to reduce our impact on wildlife and the environment, how to help wild animals more. So teaching has always been a huge foundational principle for us. And we get in, as a hospital, we get in about 3,800 patients a year. It's always hard to pick our average caseload because it seems to keep growing as many wildlife rehabilitation centers do these days. But yeah, we're at about 3,800 a year.
Okay. The other thing I want to give a shout out to is that with your mission of outreach and trying to make wildlife rehabilitation, train people in wildlife rehabilitation, the Wildlife Center of Virginia and especially Amanda have run the Call of the Wild conference for wildlife rehabilitation. I don't even, how many years have you been doing that?
Oh, gosh. This year, it's something like 27, 28 years.
Yeah, if you've not, the last few years or during COVID, I should say, it was an online conference. Don't know if you guys are going to go to a hybrid or to in person or what is happening in the future. But for everyone listening, if you've not been to this conference, you need to go. So it's an excellent conference. I've been many times, and it is one of the top in the country. So we'll put links to that in the show notes too, so you can kind of check that out as well and start planning because
awesome. Yeah, I know it is going to be hybrid this year. So we thought we'd conquer new frontiers and do some hands-on training, but also still offer a lot of online classes because we've gotten a lot of good response and it's really accessible that way. So I haven't started actively planning really hard yet, but I mean, Gail, you're talking high praise for the conference, but of course you've spoken at it for many years too. So that's,
and feel very fortunate that I've been able to do that, but also attend the conference. So, and we are having this conversation today in 2023 in early summer, and the conference is usually in November, right?
Yes, correct.
In November. So November 2023. So please mark your calendars, everybody, because it is a good one. But today we're going to be talking a lot about social media and what it is, how we can use it, kind of do's and don'ts, if there's principles we need to talk about to kind of get everybody, because a lot of us are on social media, but are we using it to its full potential? Not sure. So anyway, Amanda, what's social media?
That's a fun question because I feel like, everyone surely knows what social media is, and I'm sure people can readily think of platforms, and maybe, whether you're using social media or not, you probably have some sense of like Facebook or Twitter or whatever. But I think that question of like, what is social media makes me like, oh gosh, what's the definition of it? And generally, it's thought of as a collective term for websites and apps that are based on content sharing within a community. And it has an emphasis on interaction. And I think that those to me are that definition provides a good emphasis on what makes social media a little bit different. And it is really based on that content sharing and interaction with one another. It's sharing stuff in communities.
Okay.
It's another means of communication. And I'm sure that we all can think of some of the big players out there. So when we're talking about social media, we're thinking things like Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, TikTok, YouTube is social media too. But of course, there's always new little platforms coming out too.
Right. And one of the things you said, because one of my questions was going to be, well, what is the difference between social media and like our other or traditional forms of media? And one of the things you said was that community and sharing of information. So usually when I'm watching the news at night on TV, it's usually one way, even
Yep.
though they sometimes try to get interaction, like send us your weather pictures or things like that. But usually that's more of a one way kind of conversation.
Yeah, I think that's one of the big things that makes social media different. Lots of similarities in terms of communicating different messages and things. If you're thinking about this from an organizational perspective, but yeah, that two-way communication and interaction is the big thing that sets it apart. And I think I don't know, sometimes I don't even necessarily think about it. We know social media because it's been around for a while now. If you were an early adopter, anyway. But yeah, exactly. When you think about that television piece, if you're sitting at home watching the news or you're listening to the radio during your drive, it's all that one-way information. So you're listening or you're watching and listening and absorbing that piece of information, but you don't really have that opportunity to say, oh, wow, or oh, no, or, any sort of reaction, or I guess you do, but the organization or news deliverer is not going to hear that at all. So yeah, social media has opened up this world in which people can have this response and they can have opinions and thoughts and questions, and whether that's for good or for bad is maybe depends on the day of the week or the minute of the day, but people can add their voice into the mix and become a part of that story.
Okay. That's probably why it's also very popular and powerful, a powerful tool because of that.
Yeah.
So excellent. So you mentioned, of course, that social media is a form of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we're talking about communication here, and if we are talking about our organizations or I as an individual wildlife rehabilitator want to communicate something out to, we're just going to pick on Facebook, and my followers on Facebook, whether it's 10 or 3,000, might be responding to whatever I post. But we're talking basically about communication. Are there some principles of communication that everybody should know, no matter what form they're trying to communicate in this realm of wildlife rehabilitation?
Yes, I think so. um, I mean, it's like, are there fundamentals of communication? The first thing that pops into my head is use good grammar. But that's, maybe a pet peeve of mine too, is more for written communications out there, at least, is use good grammar. But yeah, I think if you are representing yourself on Facebook, and I should preface this by saying I will talk about, like, I'll use the term organization a lot if you're representing your organization's work, but I don't mean that you have to be a big center or anything like that to be on social media. So if, individual at-home rehabilitators certainly can use social media to convey their messaging through their wildlife rehabilitation profession as well. I don't want organization to sound limiting by any means. But I think it's more that, to me, organization, you're an entity, you're kind of representing your work. So you're thinking of this professionally. You're not acting as yourself of like, look at my personal, vacation photos or whatever. So in this broader sense, if your organization or entity or whatever is on social media, I think some key principles of communication to keep in mind. One big one for me is a piece of advice that I read somewhere in the early years when I was, when social media was still young and I was trying to figure out how to deal with this at the Wildlife Center and like how best to formulate our online persona, really, was there is this analogy of like, be like the good person at the party that everyone wants to talk to. And that's always stuck with me. And I feel like I read that so many years ago. I really, there's a lot of good resources out there that are always changing as social media changes. But in the early days, or my early days of learning about social media, there was a guy named John Hayden, and he's since passed away. But he had a lot of really good information and advice out there, and this came from him, or I attribute it to him anyway, of like, you're acting as your organization on your Facebook page or whatever. Be that person at the party who's engaging and responsive and ask questions and like just picture that person. And I'm sure we all can, right? Like you can think about going to your neighbors for a backyard barbecue or going to your coworker's house for a holiday party. I'm sure that all of us can think about the really cool people that you're drawn to and that you want to listen to or talk to. Typically those people are, they're asking questions, they're talking about interesting things, they're being engaging, and they're not talking about themselves all the time. I think we can all also think about maybe the person at the party that we kind of stay away from because we're like, wow, that person doesn't stop talking about themselves, or like that person who kind of like sucks all of the oxygen out of the room. And I think it's such a relatable analogy because we all know those people, and so I think you can apply that to social media and representing your organization out there as well. So
I do love that analogy because it's reachable for everybody, because you're right. Everybody has been to those parties and can relate to who those people you're drawn to or would prefer not to stand by or those kinds of things. And thinking about it that way when you're representing yourself on social media, I think that's really good.
Yeah.
It's reachable for everybody. It's not just the large organizations that, are speaking science speak or something like that. You don't have to be like that.
Right.
But you do want to be engaging. So,
because I think to me that speaks to developing your organization's voice on social media, right? And that's you're going to develop your organization's voice through any sort of means of communication, whether that is putting content on your website about how you say the Wildlife Center of Virginia, blah, 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 like admitted 32 squirrels yesterday, or you have that voice the way that your organization writes about itself. So whether that's website or an email newsletter or your literal voice on the phone with how you have, the people who answer the phone speak, do they say, Wildlife Center of Virginia, this is Amanda, how can I help you? Or do they say, what? I don't know. They may want to at this time of year, but, so I think we may have all of these different voices that have nuances between them, depending on if we're answering the phone or we're writing up a website story, or we're posting on Facebook. But to me, it's that analogy of being that, the person at the party analogy, helped me develop our voice, and I think helps me keep our voice consistent, because that's another big thing of, depending on, if you're an at-home rehabilitator and you're wanting to post on social media about your rehabilitation work, well, if you're a singular at-home rehabber, then it's probably you doing it. Maybe you have some help. If you are at a larger center and you're doing it, maybe you have a team of people, but it's important for everyone to really lean into that voice and kind of get into it so that you can't necessarily tell who's writing.
That voice that you're talking about, I want to kind of delve a little bit more into that. And so is that something that, and we'll talk about an organization more than one. So do you, as the Wildlife Center of Virginia, did you sit down and say, this is the type of things we would like to express and how we would like to express, and this is how our voice would be?
and kind of decide on that? Or did it come kind of more naturally? Or because you were developing a lot of that stuff, is it mostly, okay, here's Amanda's voice and how does it all sound to everybody? And then everybody adopted it. I mean, how did that happen?
I think, yeah, I think for us here at the center, it's really my voice for the social media to an extent, depending on the platform, because the way that we handle things currently is that everyone kind of has their own platform to babysit, and maybe we dip into each other, we cover for each other or all contribute to one versus another. But I think in looking way back, kind of, thinking back through my origin story, I became the director of outreach in 2010, and for that next decade of time, I think I really got to learn social media as it was being born, which is weird to think about. And I mean, if you look back through the history, it's like Facebook was released to the public in 2006. I've never been an early adopter of anything. So, I don't know. That's kind of a general good rule of thumb too, as other platforms are born. Of my advice is always like, give it a little time just to see if it's going to take or not, right? Don't invest your time in something that may go away in a year. But so I feel like by the time Facebook really became a thing for more, organizations to have pages or profiles at first or whatever, that was me then figuring it out of like, oh, okay, this does seem to be a thing that we should probably do. Same thing with Twitter. Instagram was born in like 2010. So again, we gave it a few years and we were like, oh, it does seem like a big thing that is sticking around. And of course, TikTok is much more recent than all of that. So I think for the early days, it was Facebook. That was like the first platform that we adopted because it was one of the few out there at the time. So I think it really was me just kind of like testing stuff out of like, okay, well, this is how I think we should do this. These are really good resources that are helping me put this together. And I guess from there, as different new staff members have come on, if I'm training somebody new on how to do this, it's really, it's sitting down and saying like, okay, here's my take on this. Read some examples, but generally my rules for social media are use good grammar, use a really like friendly, we want to be like that friendly, but educational, and sometimes kind of funny person at the party. Like I really do come back to that analogy pretty consistently because I think it's easy for everyone to envision. But we write about things in the royal we. There is no I in social media from when you're representing this organization anyway. So we all just kind of have to lean into what's there.
Right. Do you have when somebody else is learning, or maybe not, maybe they've been doing it for a while. I mean, do you have a checks and balances system where I may not know as much about the center, but I'm writing something about squirrels, and let's say the squirrels, someone had them for 2 weeks and gave them inappropriate food for 2 weeks,
Mm-hmm.
and I want to post on this on social media, and number one, do you have people check everybody to make sure that voice is staying consistent? And number two, how do you, and we'll probably get into this a little later too, more in depth, but how do you deal with that, with the situation I just gave you?
Yeah, so for people who are newer to the Wildlife Center, who are going to be responsible for social media, we usually go through some sort of checking in period. I don't particularly want to read and edit every singular thing until the end of time.
But why not, Amanda?
I know. There's only but so much time in the day, but also, I want to, my goal is to have everyone be able to do this and feel good about it, and me not have to worry about it. But certainly at first there is that sort of like, yep, why don't you write something and then just run it by me, and we'll talk through it, and I'll give you some, pointers about what we might say or might not say, or whatever. Yeah, so I think that sort of like on your feet, but a quick check-in review can work really well. Facebook and Instagram also have some really helpful tools. Right now, it's called Meta Business Suite, which is a slightly ridiculous name. Don't come for me, social media people. But it's actually really useful because you can schedule out a lot of posts in there. Yeah, so first of all, big time saver. I feel like for the longest time, I think my mother did not know that you could do that. So she was like, you post every Saturday and Sunday. And I'm like, oh, I set that during the week. I'm not working on the weekends, but it's actually a really nice way for, if somebody has an idea and they want to write something up, they can post it, they can format it, they can get it how it will appear on Facebook and Instagram, but they can just schedule it into the future and then say, hey, I dropped it in there, it's all set, can you take a look at it and edit it? And then I can go in and tweak it and give them feedback, and then, either post it now or keep it scheduled or whatever.
Sure. Okay. Well, really good pro tip there.
Yes, there we go.
Very good pro tips. We're going to talk about pro tips all the way through. How's that?
Yeah, we'll sprinkle them in.
We'll sprinkle pro tips. So you mentioned photographs. So we've been up to this point talking about written communication.
Yes.
But we all know that pictures are worth 1,000 words. So how do you follow? Well, I have two questions, one with photographs and one with stories altogether. But how do you choose what photograph you're going to use with the story you're going to tell or the post you're going to post?
I think for the most part, a lot of the photos... A lot of the things we post are actually probably driven by photos, I'll say. We have a means here at the Wildlife Center of collecting photographs from staff. Maybe that's another pro tip, because sometimes that is half the battle, let me tell you. But we have access to a lot of great photos, and sometimes those will inspire a particular post. I mean, sometimes I know we all, I have a team of people working on social media stuff, different platforms, and I know inevitably somebody hits a wall where it's like, oh my gosh, I should really post something, but I don't know what, because we're, haven't scheduled out our posts or whatever. But, if one of the rehabilitators shares a really super cute, adorable opossum photo, we're like, boom, there's inspiration. Let's use that and then type up a message that goes with it, either about that individual patient or some general factoids about opossums and, that sort of stuff. So sometimes the photos actually do the driving. Sometimes we do have that message and we want to utilize, we want an image to go along with it, just because, it tends to do better on social media if there's images. So I guess when we're picking photos, that kind of comes back to maybe a good principles of communication thing to keep in mind that's very specific to our field, which is really making sure that we're representing wildlife rehabilitation in a nice and professional way. And of course, we all have, our wildlife rehabilitator code of ethics to uphold and adhere to. But I think it's always worth remembering that, we're representing our field to the wider world out there. So we do want to choose accordingly. And that means things like always wearing proper PPE, so wearing gloves when handling patients, and sometimes goggles, and, always representing things in a really professional way, not... Yeah, I was going to say jam it down your shirt. So I took it even more unprofessional. But yeah, so I think that's really important that we all collectively kind of adhere to, just because we are representing not just our organizations, but this entire field to people who don't know much about it out there. So really thinking through that and making sure that the photos look good. I guess other things that I like to keep in mind are there's a fine line in there, and it's also very subjective as to what's appropriate for things like, do I want to show a baby rabbit that's come in with a huge degloving injury from a cat attack. Personally, I don't. I think there is a bit of a gore and ick factor, and while that can certainly make a statement, I do feel like ultimately people walk away with like worse feelings about it. I know at the very least, I think if some organizations, I've seen them making posts that are a little bit gorier because it's a part of the story and it is worth showing, but they'll put a little trigger warning on there just to make sure people know that, like, we don't want people to log on and be scrolling through Facebook and like have, a face full of maggots in there if they're not prepared for it. So maybe a warning of like, the next photo you see, like, don't scroll to the next photo if you don't want to be really grossed out, sort of thing. So trying to be respectful of people's boundaries as well. I really also make sure that I don't want to post photos of animals that look severely stressed. I, like you, because I learn all of my things about education ambassadors and training and all of that from Gail, but I think I, like you, are also really sensitive to posting ambassador photos in a way that they are looking good. And sometimes other people who maybe don't know the ambassadors very well will, somehow find a photo where that animal looks a little bit stressed to me because I know that animal, and they want to use it on something. I'm like, nope, can't use that. That bird looks really unhappy. So
That's right. Right. Yeah. I think that photographs in particular, because we know that photographs grab attention. We're very visual creatures. Humans are, right? But a picture is not worth 1,000 words. To me, a picture is worth almost 1,000,000 words, right?
Yeah,
And you
yeah.
take a picture out of context
Yes.
so easily.
Yeah.
And so representing your organization and professionalism and rehabilitation and that particular animal, not showing them again in that distress situation or something like that, I think are all just incredibly important points to make, because things can be taken out of context right away. And people will look at or the gross picture, right? And people will look at the picture and maybe not read the post with it, or look at the picture and read the post, but take something very different away from it than what we want.
Yes.
Right?
It's gray. I mean, I think that a lot of us would agree of like wearing proper PPE. Yes, that's a yes. Just do it, right? But there's a lot of shades of gray and subjective decisions that you just have to do what's right for your organization and your voice and the message that you want to send. I'll give you an example of we had at one point, one of our veterinarians did a poster presentation on the data from our patients that came in from cat attacks. And it came in over, he was looking at data over like a 10 or 11 year period. And for his poster, which was presented at a professional conference somewhere, he had some images of a lot of birds, mammals. I think we just focused on birds and mammals that were dead, that had not made it from their treatment, but came into us. So they were kind of all laid out, and it was, that was a part of his professional presentation. That's fine. That was his decision to make. I don't think that there was anything wrong with that. When it comes to social media, we could go in that direction. We could say, here is a whole amalgamation of dead songbirds and baby bunnies and squirrels that were attacked by cats. I think someone had suggested that to me at one point, and I was like, there's just something in my gut that's just not what I want to do. And I think it's that same sort of thing out there of like, there are humane organizations that, they have the sad Sarah McLachlan music that of like sad dogs and cats, and you just kind of walk away from it being like, I'm someone who deeply loves my dogs, like more than anything else on this planet, really. So I get it. I'm even you. Like, I get it. I'm buying into it. Like, give dogs good homes, adopt them, give them good welfare, do all the things for them. But when I walk away from that, I'm like, God, now I feel really bad. But like, I have 2 adopted dogs, but what else can I do? Like, it's just like a little despair feeling because it's sad to me. So for that cat attack thing, I was like, but I do want to talk about the dangers of outdoor cats on wildlife. So instead, I asked our staff for weeks on end to collect photos of living patients. But I wanted them all in a very certain way. I wanted just tight headshots against a blue background. And I like hung up a blue background on the back of our closet in our waiting room. So it was really easy for them, and just was like, get a baby bunny, get a songbird, get a whatever, hold it up in front of this, mostly try and make it tight, but I can edit it. And ultimately, I ended up with these a huge array of these cute little like square tight shots on a variety of wildlife patients. And I made that like, here are the faces of cat attacks. And it was still the same message of like, cats cause a lot of problems for wildlife, outdoor cats. But instead of kind of, like having to look at a bunch of dead animals, which is really depressing, at least there were cute faces. I feel like it still gave a solid message, but maybe not quite in the same despair way, because some people are really sensitive to that. So,
well, and it's not only that people are really sensitive to it. It's like you mentioned with the Animal and Humane Society. I've seen those commercials too, and I'm like, I get why they work. And I the same thing. I've got rescue cats, rescue dogs. I mean, everything. So it's like, what more can I do? I give money, but I feel like I'm still not doing enough.
yeah.
But you're doing it. So those commercials to me often come at that mental cost, right? That I feel like despair. There's nothing I can do or nothing more I can do. So that's where I sit with it. But a post like you just described, these are the faces of cat attacks, for example, or whatever you titled it, then it's future stuff, right?
Yes.
It's like, well, if I keep my cat indoors during the springtime, for example, you're giving action items, right? So you're saying, well, this is what happens. We would love to prevent it, to help these young animals. Here's some action items that you can do to help.
Yes.
And you're not accusing anybody. You're not making them just feel horrible about the whole situation that they can't do anything. In fact, you're giving them things that they can do. Oh gosh, in the spring, I can do this, this, and this. So is that?
Yeah, that's a great point, actually, of like the, dead animals is kind of like, well, I can't do anything to help those animals. They are not with us anymore. But yeah, I think the other kind has it is kind of more like forward facing. But again, I don't want to, this to me is one of those very subjective areas of like, you have to decide what's right for you, what kind of voice you want to have, what kind of presence you want to have. And I think that all plays into that. That helps as you develop things. It helps shape how you're putting content out there, how you're packaging things.
I mean, one of the things that when I see, a couple things. I mean, I want to talk about quote unquote good posts versus not so good posts. But one of the things that I've certainly seen posts on is something like I was mentioning earlier. Someone had the baby squirrels for 2 weeks, didn't feed them right. And all of a sudden they quote unquote found you, which, well, if you found me now, you could have found me 2 weeks ago. But beyond that, then people want to post on it, and which I think is fine. But the challenge I have is when they become accusatory.
Yes.
And to me, it doesn't serve anybody. As much as I want to just yell at these people and just like, you've really compromised these babies, it doesn't do you any good.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that when it goes on something like social media?
I worry about this same things of, again, it's that, what do we ultimately want people to walk away with here? I mean, I think at the heart of it, we want to be forward facing. We can't go back in time into our time machine and get that person to bring those squirrels in 2 weeks ago. That ship has sailed. But if we want to use that as an example for just making people aware that that this is the time of year where we're seeing a lot of baby animals, and these baby animals don't have a lot of time to be in the, with people before they can get to a proper authority if they even really truly need help. I get wanting to use that story as fuel to drive some educational messaging for sure. Personally, I think I'm more inclined to try and generalize it rather than saying these two specific squirrels came in today from some woman who had them, because it starts to get accusatory really fast. But I would maybe use that story and maybe like throw a few photos in of, like a bird covered in some schmutz that someone was trying to feed it and whatever. Think of a few examples and say, hey, this is the time of year when this happens and we see it, and we want people to be aware that, blah, 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 we are here, call a permitted wildlife rehab, or did you know that human food can be really terrible for these baby animals? So I would change it more into a, like, please don't feed generalized message rather than calling somebody out specifically. That's me, I guess. And I think part of that is driven by seeing Facebook of people are really they can be really quick to get ugly on there. And I just don't want anybody to walk away feeling really horrible about it, honestly. I know sometimes in the moment we're like, I just want to yell at somebody because I'm real frustrated. But ultimately, I don't know that that's a great way to teach somebody. So, yeah.
Okay. When you have people who are either trolling, and you can talk about what trolls are, and or people who are either trying to co-opt the conversation on the comments and take it in a completely different direction, like political all of a sudden. And what? How did that happen? I was talking about baby robins. Or that they are just pretty disparaging on the organization, for example. I brought in blah, blah, blah 2 years ago and it died. So don't ever bring anything to them because they euthanize everything.
Yeah.
Kind of thing. So how do you deal with comments? How do you work with the comments?
Yes. You can take a couple of approaches depending on how you're feeling and what your mental state is in that moment. If you have a deep well of patience, one thing I like to do is just really I will go out of my way to be kind and explain things, because ultimately I think if they persist in that conversation, they're the ones that are looking really bad. So I do like to address things, especially if it's that I brought you a chimney swift and I had it for 5 days and it was fine. And then you took it and killed it and you hate animals, right? Because it always goes in that direction. So my typical response would be trying to validate some of their feelings. I'm trying so hard to not meet them at their level and just be like, well, you're a dumb ding dong, because that's obviously I know you want to say it, but it's not serving anybody, right? It's not professional, whatever. So I would respond of, thanks so much for your concern. We were also really sad about that chimney swift because our staff loves chimney swifts when they come in here. And we did find that when we examined it, that it actually had a beak defect and also had metabolic bone disease. I'm actually pulling from a real social media interaction story. So,
and you would take the person's name and go find that particular case.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, cool. Yeah. And follow up of great, we're going to basically do a patient update, which we do with rescuers over email. So we have now taken this patient update and made it public because you have tried to take this down an ugly path. But I would try and explain here's why we euthanized it or why we think it died. We do really encourage you, if you do find a chimney swift or any other wild animal, please give us a call sooner. We know you did have it for 5 days, and it would be a lot better if we could get it to us or someone else. If you don't want to bring it here anymore, we're happy to put you in touch with wonderful rehabilitators from around the state of Virginia. So I try very hard to keep it really professional and friendly and validate, like, we know that you're sad about this chimney swift that is dead. We are also sad because contrary to what you wrote, like, we do actually love animals here.
Right. And we want to get them back to the wild.
Right.
Thank you very much. Alive.
Yes. Yes. So I usually have some sort of response like that. Sometimes it ends there. More often than not, they don't, they just come back with like, whatever, it was totally fine, and I will never bring an animal to you ever again. And depending on how they're really writing back, I may just drop it because at some point you have to walk away, and you could probably play that game forever of going back and forth, and nobody has time and it's not productive. I definitely allow them like one very kind response. Sometimes I will follow up and say, and we'll just kind of repeat myself, sometimes literally copying and pasting what I wrote before, but adding on to it or changing it a little bit, just of like, we know that you're really frustrated. Again, we're so sorry that it didn't make it. We definitely, recommend bringing it to us sooner next time. And if they keep persisting, I walk away. If they ever get threatening or ugly or start swearing at us, or particularly if they're ever like targeting a specific staff member because they're just really mad that whatever, I do warn them of like, this needs to stop. If you are going to attack us and our staff, we will delete this and ban you. I would much rather keep that thread active, honestly. I don't ever move to like deleting and banning someone quickly. I would really rather have that educational interaction, mostly so that other people can see it. But if they ever, if they're getting like abusive, then like, that's it, forget it. We're not going to play this game. So.
Right. Huh. And then trolls.
Yes, trolls. Don't
you want to explain
trolls
to everybody what trolls are? At the beginning of Facebook, I remember, because I was an admin for Facebook for the Raptor Center, and we got a couple, and we're like, what do we do?
Yes.
I don't know what to do.
My rule with the trolls is don't feed the trolls, much like you shouldn't feed ducks. Don't feed trolls.
Don't feed the bread. Don't feed the trolls. So what are trolls?
So, I mean, to me, and maybe everybody has a different definition. Maybe, what are trolls to you? Trolls to me are someone who is on your page making comments in a really non-productive way. Like, they're just there to create chaos. Like, we have those rescue situations like with the chimney swift or the squirrels that go awry, and those people are like, even if they're being really mean, I almost give them somewhat of a pass, because I know inherently it is coming from like emotional upset that this animal did not make it. And yeah, from like somewhere down, now we're not packaging it well, but like, I know it is from a place of caring. So somewhere down deep, we actually do have some commonalities, whether they think so or not. But to me, trolls are like, they're just there to wreak havoc. They're there being like, well, you're dumb, or wildlife, or stupid, or whatever. Or like you said earlier, they try and make it political for some weird reason of like, how did we get here?
That's right. Well, I didn't turn on this road. What the heck?
We a few weeks ago did a live stream programming on, we called it Baby Cam. It was a camera in our ICU where we have a lot of young animals. So people got to see the rehabilitators feeding squirrels and opossums and maybe a couple baby birds. Mostly baby mammals, and the rehabbers were like up and down from their chairs a lot to like go to the incubator to get the squirrel out, and then they'd feed it on camera, and then they'd put it in a little basket and take it back to the incubator. So like, coming and going was the cam shot. Man, we had somebody on there who every couple of minutes would be like, oh, what's this? We're looking at a pen again. I don't even see anything. We came on here to see babies. Nobody wants to see that pen and piece of paper or whatever. It was so dumb. I mean,
just go someplace else then. You don't have to watch.
That was, yeah. Like, he was clearly there just to cause chaos. It was not adding anything. I think maybe somebody acknowledged it on camera of like, yeah, thanks for your patience as we get out animals that aren't here. I don't know. We just ignored him because it was just kind of dumb of like, I don't know, my dude. Internally we were like, okay, should we refund your money for this free program that you're watching right now? But okay. So I
We'll
think for
send
the
you your check and it's in the mail.
yeah, exactly. I think it's really like when you have people like that, if they're doing it to get a rise out of someone. So I feel like the best thing we can do is just not respond at all.
The other thing that I've certainly found, and this is not with trolls, right? But with people who maybe it is with trolls too, when people are saying pretty disparaging things about the organization, your supporters come out.
Yes. Oh,
and
man.
They sometimes do the work for you.
Yes.
And boy, I just feel the love when that happens.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. That's kind of like the other preferred way of dealing with it in some cases. And to me, the legwork that you do as an organization is like you've already put that legwork in by being really engaging and informational and developing and cultivating this persona again on social media to where you have followers and fans who are engaged with you and they're like, oh, I love this page because you have good information, and you're cultivating supporters, even if they're not donating monetarily. That's not, you don't have to do that to be a supporter. So yeah, to me, putting in the work of trying to give social media its due and creating this army of supporters can serve you well. We had that situation happen a few weeks ago. We posted a photo of a snake that was stuck in some netting, and it actually was somebody had dropped it off on our doorstep that morning and was like, oh, it was before we opened. It was like, I'm so sorry for the snake, found the snake in the garden netting. I hope you can help him, sort of thing. And it was just dropped off. But we didn't have any rescue information, which made everybody panic because we need to know, where snakes come from So our front desk supervisor was like, do you want to put this on Facebook? Like, is that worth it to just put it out there? And I was like, absolutely. Plus, it's a great educational thing of like, I do want information, but it's also a good way to say like, hey, this matters to us and here's why, because reptiles, small home ranges, blah, blah, blah. So it did work. We got our information very quickly. So that was great. Snake was great. But in the meantime, some people were like, oh, that's a beautiful racer. It was a black racer. And they're like, oh, yeah, garden netting can be rough on snakes. So they're like commenting about other stuff. And of course, here comes some woman, and I actually wrote it down. She was like, I'm sorry. People are starving all over the world, and you're spending money on a friggin' snake. So, which I love that, I'm being very sarcastic, use my sarcastic font here. That argument of like, that you can't care about more than one thing, right? Of like, people are starving, or there's cancer in the world, or people don't have access to fresh water, but like, we're caring about a snake. There's a lot of stuff happening in this world. It's so wonderful that we as humans can all develop our interests, and we can have many interests, and we can support many interests. But, so, yeah. It didn't even matter. I saw it and was like, well, that's more of a troll comment. Is that worth my time? And I think I was actually in progress of, like, leaving my work office and migrating back home to my house to finish out the day working from home. And I don't live very far. So in that span of time, as I got myself set up, it was 20 minutes later or whatever, I looked at it and was like, well, everybody's taking care of that for us. There is zero need for me to respond. And it's people ran the gamut from you're not being very nice to them, and trying to defend us, to people being like, excuse me, snakes are great. They're really beneficial. They're doing the educating. Some people are like, why would they not be spending money on a snake? They're a wildlife rescue organization. That's kind of what they duh. Somebody thankfully clarified that we are not your government dollars at work. So in case she thought her taxes were paying us. So gold star to them for clarifying that, because I think sometimes that's a misconception. And other people are like, is this is this your money? Like, did you give money to them? Like, if you don't want money to be spent, then just don't give money to them to fix snakes. But like, why should other people be your concern? Like, people were all over it. And I was like, oh my gosh, what an amazing community.
Yes, that's very nice that they took care of you, and they took care of you in the appropriate ways.
Yes.
Right. And that's not like saying, you're so stupid, get off of here. It's like, snakes are important too. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And yes, so other problems are around. We get it. All of us get it. And I think people who are in animal caring situations get it more than others. Yeah. In some situations. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release Season 2. That was the first half of my recent interview with Amanda Nicholson. She's the Senior Vice President of the Wildlife Center of Virginia. She's also a social media savvy communicator, always advocating for wildlife conservation awareness. In Part 2, we'll cover live streaming, some do's and don'ts, and using different platforms to reach different audiences. Be sure to tune in. Wildlife Rehabilitation from Rescue to Release is a production of Partners for Wildlife, working hand in hand with wildlife rehabilitators and veterinarians to improve the welfare of orphaned, ill, and injured wildlife. Our executive producer is me, Gail Buell. I'm the Partnership Coordinator for Partners for Wildlife at the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine's Raptor Center. To learn more about the Raptor Center and Partners for Wildlife, visit raptor.umn.edu. Our producer is Kurt Clockey. Special thanks to our guest Amanda Nicholson. Also to Partners for Wildlife and the Raptor Center at the University of Minnesota College of Veterinary Medicine. And that's our show. Hope you'll join us again next time.